Oh yeah, Fat Tire bikes. They make the rockin' world go round, and when you add a battery and a motor, they become the absolute most fun way to cover just about any terrain imaginable. Hey everyone, Micah here with Electrek, and today I'm showing you my list of my top 5 favorite Electrek Fat Tire bikes that I've tested for summer of 2020. Let's check it out. First up on the list is the Rad Rover from Rad Power Bikes. It's actually available in 2 options, either a standard frame or a step-thru frame. They're otherwise nearly identical, so the major difference is just what type of geometry you prefer. The standard frame has a triangle that can be nice for adding bags or other accessories, but the step-thru Rad Rover is of course more accessible to a wider range of riders, especially those with leg injuries or who otherwise find it hard to swing a leg over such a big bike. Either way you slice it, both offer a great ride with a 750 watt motor in back, a suspension fork up front, 672 watt-hours of battery in the middle, and a top speed of 20 miles an hour or 32 kilometers per hour, which classifies the bike as a Class 2 throttle e-bike. Rad also has a huge line of accessories that you can choose from to customize your ride, and at $1,499, it's hard to beat Rad in terms of value. The only downside to the Rad Rover I've found so far is that it's just kind of a big bike, which is why I'm actually going to include another Rad Power bike here. Ta-da! The Rad Mini Step-thru. This bike gets you most of the awesome ride of the bigger Rad Rover, yet in a smaller package. Just look how this thing folds up. Try stuffing a standard Rad Rover in your trunk. Not gonna happen. But the Rad Mini Step-thru could fit in nearly any trunk out there, despite still offering big 4-inch fat tires, and it's the same reasonable price at $1,499. Not bad if you ask me. Next up on the list we have the Avanti Cinch, another folding fat tire electric bike that would be great for riding the beach or snow all day, and then stuffing in your car when you're done. The Avanti Cinch rocks an internal 672 watt-hour battery. That's as much battery as the Rad Rover from before, except that the battery gets hidden in the frame, so you don't have to look at that ugly thing. You don't need to remove it to charge either, but you can if you need to. Otherwise, you can just charge it right inside the bike and never have to pull it out. For power, the Avanti Cinch has a rear 500 watt geared hub that runs at about 750 watts peak. There are mechanical disc brakes, which I would have loved to have seen upgraded to hydraulic discs like Avanti's other classy bike, the Avanti Level, but at a reasonable price of $1,499, I can do mechanical disc brakes. Fenders don't come standard unfortunately, but they are an additional option that you can add if you live in rainy environments. For me, I'll stick with the sun and the fun though, cruising along the beach and tearing up the sand. Generally speaking, this is a ton of fun riding the Avanti Cinch on sand like this, though there is one drawback to the bike, which is that the throttle doesn't work from rest. You need to pedal about half a revolution or so before the throttle kicks in. That's fine on the road, but in deep sand, that half a revolution is a pretty tall order. Once you get going though, it's smooth sailing, and this is honestly just a blast and a half to ride. The wide tires float over sand and obstacles, while the small tire diameter keeps the bike nimble and agile. It's just a great fat tire bike that looks pretty darn good too, if you ask me. Alright, next up we have the CSC FT750 series, which is another e-bike that is actually 2 e-bikes, since it comes in both a 20-inch wheel size and a 26-inch wheel size. Both are fat tires, of course, and pretty much everything else is identical. The main difference is that the smaller version rides more like a BMX bike, while the larger version is a bit more of a boat, but that also means it's better for tackling larger obstacles. Both are very nicely spec'd and are the first models on this list to come with hydraulic disc brakes. They both get nice suspension forks too, and LED lights, large displays, USB charging ports, etc. You'll notice I'm doing a lot of sand riding, and that's because fat tire bikes are really the only way you're going to get out on the sand like this, and it is worth it because this is just so much fun. I'm not the best at sand riding, but I still enjoy it. Plus, if you fall, it's a soft landing, so there's that. Now, both of the CSC FT750 models have 750 watt motors, and they can easily ride even in loose, deep sand, making them powerful e-bikes that aren't afraid of hills either. And with a top speed of 25 miles per hour or 40 kilometers per hour on pedal assist, or a bit slower 20 miles an hour or 32 kilometers per hour on throttle, these are Class 3 e-bikes that would make great commuter bikes as well. Sure, fat tires look a bit strange on the road, but the same aspects that make them ride so well on trails also mean you get a nice cushy ride on hard surfaces as well. The fat tires aren't quite as responsive as skinnies, but we're not competing here, we're commuting, so they're just fine for us. At $1,688, the FT750 e-bikes cost a little more than the other two e-bikes on the list so far, but they go faster and have nicer specs too, which makes them winners in my book. Fourth on this list is the Ecotrick Fat Tire bike. Now I'm gonna come right out and say this first. This is not an amazing bike, it's a budget e-bike. That means it's designed to do what fat tire e-bikes can do, but it has absolutely zero bells and whistles. For around $900, you get a 500 watt motor and a 470 watt hour battery, and you get zero suspension. But you know what? The bike still works quite well for two reasons. One, on a budget bike like this, cheap suspension would have to be so cheap that I'd worry about how long it would hold up before breaking, and so I'd rather not have suspension at all on an ultra budget bike like this. Instead, I know that a rigid fork or a hardtail frame is basically just gonna last forever as long as I don't abuse it and bash it over a rock or something. And two, with fat tires, you get a bit of suspension just from that large air volume in the tires. Look at the kind of trails I'm riding here. This isn't a smooth street by any means, but the ride is much better than you'd expect from a bike with zero suspension. And that's because you're effectively riding on pillows with so much air in those tires. In terms of the bike's performance, it definitely doesn't have the power of 750 watt e-bikes, which means that on the steepest of hill climbs, I did have to pedal a bit to help it up. If you don't have the strength to pedal, or you have leg injuries that mean you rely on throttle 100% of the time, this might not be the bike for you if you live in a really hilly area. But for anyone else, as long as you don't mind pedaling on the steepest of hills, the bike performs great the rest of the time on moderate hills and of course on flat ground. The reason I like this bike so much is that it's just a solid budget option, and since not everyone can afford a multi-thousand-dollar e-bike or even a $1,000 e-bike, I think it's great that there are solid options in the sub-$1,000 range for fat tire bikes that might not be super high-end, but are good enough to have a lot of fun on. There really is an e-bike out there for everyone. And last but not least, we've got a massive e-bike for you to round out the list. This is the Super Monarch Crown all-wheel drive 1500. And yes, the 1500 in the name stands for 1500 watts, believe it or not. There are not one but two 750 watt motors on this bike, one in each wheel, and they put out a continuous 1500 watts together. But get this, at peak power, they're rocking closer to 3000 watts, which is what you'll feel on acceleration and while climbing hills. Oh, and while riding trails. This is of course a hunter-oriented e-bike, if you couldn't tell by the paint job, but that doesn't mean you have to shoot Bambi to ride it. It's also going to be available in black soon, but who cares what color it is? You'll be going too fast for anyone to see what color you were anyways. I've gotten the Super Monarch up to 33 miles an hour or 53 kilometers per hour, and this thing is a beast. It just wants to do that power and speed all day. And with a pair of batteries adding up to 1500 watt hours, it really can ride all day. That's right, it's got dual batteries, and dual motors, and dual suspension. It's even got dual hydraulic disc brakes with 4 pistons each. Seriously folks, this e-bike is the epitome of excess, and it makes me love it even more for it. It's just a blast to ride on everything from narrow trails to wide open road. The high speed makes it a great commuter bike that can keep up with traffic, and the suspension and fat tires make it the ultimate Armageddon bike that won't stop at anything after the apocalypse and will keep trucking over everything that gets in its way. It doesn't come cheap though, at $3,995. But come on, you didn't think a 3000 watt fat tire e-bike with dual suspension was going to be cheap, did you? This e-bike probably isn't going to apply to as many people as other budget e-bikes, but if you want to cover the most ground on the widest range of terrain with a fat tire bike, then all-wheel drive powerhouses like the Super Monarch Crown are the way to go. And speaking of going, that's it. Those are my top 5 fat tire e-bikes that I've tested for the summer of 2020, each of which is a ton of fun to ride and would look great with you on top. Thanks for watching everyone, and be sure to subscribe so you don't miss any of our future electric vehicle videos. See you here next time.